All right, hey, what's up, people? Hopefully, all the audio is fantastic. Everybody can hear everything, and I'm just going to dive into the drawing. And there's already a few questions that have come in, so I'll get to those as soon as possible. Just want to let you know, I'm drawing mostly just with my I've got my Kohinoor 2.0 millimeter lead holders, and I've got some. I think we've got some HB and some 4B in there. I'll be switching between pencils and stuff, and I got my kneaded eraser as well. So yeah, without further ado, just gonna go ahead. A couple of questions that started out. MJ was asking, "Hi Stephen, how do you go about learning constructive drawing after you studied at the academy? I heard that you had three drawing educations, one by doing didactic drawing, sculpture, and then fetching." Yeah, so just regarding the second part of that about multiple drawing educations, it's something I often say is that like after I went to the academy, I kind of I went and actually did a lot of self study, just because I kind of figured out that I could draw pretty well one way, but failing that set of circumstances, which is to say like a perfect studio situation, I really couldn't adapt all that well. I had to really kind of rely on, like I said, a perfect set of circumstances to kind of get anything done. I couldn't sketch at all, so yeah, like I won't go burden you guys with like the whole like long biographical version of it, but suffice to say that yeah, like I made some didactic drawings for the academy. I was hired to do that, and I did at length make a series of cast drawings, five cast drawings specifically, that I think are actually still in use. Well, I know are still in use in Florence and Sweden, and yeah. Anyway, the point is after that, it wasn't actually fetching that I started to study. It was Rodin's work. So I spent my 5 years, or sorry, 4 years at the academy, um, and then did a lot of self study, looking at basically other artists' work, like historical artists, and kind of copying their work and kind of trying to understand the world as they saw it. Yeah. And that kind of led me into a slightly more kind of constructive approach, which, like, I think kind of sketching also, in a way, represents that sense of drawing more constructively, drawing more kind of three dimensionally. If you are kind of familiar with like atelier practices, like this kind of very slow form drawing where you're doing a lot of measuring and stuff, you understand that's not really going to serve you if you're having to do a drawing in about 15 minutes or something. That's not really the way it works. So yeah, anyway, let's see, another question came in from Kumari Budathoki, and he says, "Hi, I have a question. What do you suggest for a self-learner to start portraits from the beginning? What drill, like learning planes of the head or abstraction, or move to cast drawing?" Yeah, no, cool question. Also because, starting with portraiture, it's like such a complex topic, and obviously, like if you're a beginner, you know straight away that you have like these limitations. Like they're immediately evident. The drawing of your family member, whatever, doesn't look like your family member. That's like the first problem that you notice. And so starting with like a full-on complex portrait is maybe not like the most useful place to go. I mean, it's possible to do if you just love portraiture, you just want to draw people, and you're not afraid to make some mistakes, then that's fine. I think that actually something that I'm going to be talking about coming up very soon in the part two of the Drawing Essentials workshop, I think kind of answers this question, in that I'm going to be talking about, and probably a lot of you have heard this name, it's a really popular name in drawing and in art lessons out there, but everybody knows Loomis and the Loomis heads. So when we're talking about those, I think they're a great place to kind of practice because they're so simplified. They don't really require like a lot of technique to be able to kind of practice something that will necessarily apply to kind of drawing a portrait. So I think starting with Loomis is kind of a cool place. It's not actually where I started. When I started at the academy, it was all working with models all the time. So anything you did, you were going to be working with like the most complex and kind of complicated version of it. Which is fine too, I guess. But not everybody is, I think, really like totally prepared for that. So I think the idea of like starting with Loomis is probably a pretty good one. So like I said, I'm gonna get into that as well. Cast drawing is also really nice, but I started even without cast drawing. I started doing bar drawings, which is another way to kind of get into drawing practice. The thing about bar drawings, of course, and if you kind of follow me in a lot of places, you'll know like I have general opinions about this stuff. But it's really hard to do without any instruction, I think, to like get the most out of bar drawings. So I think if you have someone to work with, I think getting into bars can be interesting. If not, it can be. I mean, it can be interesting anyway, but maybe not as much. Let's see. Kumari is also asking, when will you release the full anatomy study of the head in Patreon? Oh, a full anatomy study of the head. So, yeah, for several years, I taught anatomy, and I'll say this, right? Teaching like a full, proper, like medical or nearly medical anatomy course is not a thing that I'm going to do. I taught anatomy and écorché for years, and quite frankly, though I found it engaging at the time, I think sometimes it's like more than you actually practically need as an artist. I'm kind of much more interested in drawing than I am in anatomy. And so with that in mind, I'm going to start doing a course this year, let's say, the next several months. I'll probably start to announce when and what it's going to comprise of. But I'm toying with calling it something like Anatomy That I Use, which the distinction I'm trying to make there is just that this is going to be anatomy that happens in your drawing. Anatomy that's going to make a difference in every drawing that you do, as opposed to, say, anatomy that is interesting more for from the perspective of just being interested in anatomy, right? Which you can be an enthusiast for. That doesn't mean necessarily that all of it's going to wind up like in your drawing. So that's where I'm at with that for now. There will be a course of a type coming, but it's going to be focused on like practical application of anatomy, and not a like kind of comprehensive every layer of muscle down to the bone kind of anatomy. So a lot of questions coming in. Jeffrey Sawyer is saying hello from Pennsylvania. Hello, Jeffrey. A couple people telling me the audio is okay. That's good. MJ asks, what are your thoughts on Duran teaching his students to paint from the start? I heard Sargent had to go to the École to study drawing more properly. Yeah, I had thoughts about this when I was a student, where I kind of felt like, initially, all right, so going into the academy, this is like confessions of an Atelier student, but like, many is the story of the person that goes into the academy and thinks like, I'm just here to learn to paint, and like I already know like most of what I need to know, and so I just want to get good at painting, right? Which is like a classic case of the student not knowing what they don't know, which is like a very perilous kind of place to find yourself. But yeah, so I thought I kind of knew everything anyway, and I was just gonna like, connect the dots as far as like learning to paint was concerned. Um, Turns out I didn't know. Turns out I didn't know all the stuff that I thought I knew, and so I had to work really hard to kind of get to a place where I was proficient in drawing. Um, you know, I think it's fine. Like if you want to, enjoy painting, and that's like where you want to be and what you want to do. I think it's great. Go for it. Learn to paint. I, personally feel like you can benefit a lot just from spending as much time as possible drawing. Really, I think in a way like paint, uh, paint requires a lot of practice. Um, I don't know. You know what? In my answer to this, I'm realizing I'm kind of torn about it. Because I do feel like to get good at painting, you got to be painting, because like the material itself is so complicated. Um, but at the same time, like if you never really like learned how to draw, you're gonna be at odds to learn how to paint like really well. So yeah, and it's a tough question. Tough question. I mean, it's cool, I guess, to do it, um, uh, but you never know. I mean, like maybe if you don't study drawing enough, maybe you don't really come to that place where you're really confident about your ability to, because like paint kind of happens like in the moment, right? Like your painting like has these drying cycles, and while it's wet you need to be doing everything. If you're not really like convinced of your ability to draw like really well, um, you're always going to be kind of wondering in the back of your mind, is my painting, does the drawing make sense? Do I have the likeness? You're going to be kind of like concerned about all this stuff. You're going to be trying to like catch up on it when you should be maybe worrying about other more kind of paint specific problems. Yeah. So man, I'm all in for drawing. Uh, but it just depends upon what you like. Let's see. There's a bunch of questions and I'm gonna miss some. Dwayne DeCock asks, "Hi Stephen, what is your thought process when establishing your edge hierarchy?" It's just like values, man. Like so. Just like you go on a grayscale from dark to light, you also go on a scale from like sharp to kind of soft, in terms of your edges. And as long as you kind of maintain that hierarchy, I think that you're just fine, right? Like that's what, just like like I said, with your values, if you start putting like light values into your shadows and dark values into your lights, your value hierarchy is going to fall apart. Well, the same thing is going to happen with your edges. You start putting hard edges at your shadow shapes and soft edges at your contours and stuff. You're going to have like a pretty maybe funky impression that develops after a certain point. Yeah. Sorry, so yeah, some of you are seeing me like my hand like going across the screen here. Kind of like taking a couple of measurements, just in terms of like looking at the eye socket on one side versus the other, and I'll kind of reflect those out here as well. But it might look funny because you're not like seeing the whole room, or you're not seeing the whole studio, and you're not seeing me actually doing this. It's kind of difficult. Of course, you guys are all seeing the source image as well, though. It's kind of difficult angle actually to draw from, or I find it a little bit difficult. I mean, we'll get through it, but certainly like it's kind of challenging in establishing the block in. I like to do like a kind of a linear block in, just so I know where my structure is like from the start, rather than like you could like go into this and just like mass in a bunch of values and stuff, and that can be like really effective. But like if you know me and my work, that's that's not what I'm about. Yeah, these zygomatic bones here, just trying to make sure I get that tilt right. So I think one of them has to be a little bit lower, the other a little bit higher, slightly kind of funky tilt to this. And then the, of course, the center line kind of goes all the way out to the edge here with the maxillary, the way that kind of like curves outward, peaks at the at those teeth. So yeah, there's some stuff to figure out early on. It's like kind of a logic problem. That's the way I've always kind of looked at it, which really appeals to me. I've always kind of fancied myself to be logical, and taking that approach to drawing, I don't know, it's kind of keeps you stimulated, like I think that drawing and painting eventually, it's like one of those things you're not gonna like run out of stuff to figure out, which is good for me, because I think I can kind of get bored if something's a little bit too easy to do. Whoa, a lot of questions. All right, I gotta scroll up here for a second. All right, Philip Luthi asks, hey, I was wondering if there are drawings that you frame without glass in front, and if so, do you treat the surface of the drawing in a special way? No, there's not any drawings that I frame without glass in front. I mean, you could like theoretically do that, which by the way is something that's interesting you ask me, because I've actually kind of toyed with this idea for many years. The only way that I've come to something that could be like relatively satisfactory regarding framing a drawing without glass would be, and this is still not like 100% archival, but I think it would be possible. If you've seen some of the videos that I do, like the painting of the eye, right, where I did a painting on paper. Well, it was paper just like this, which by the way, you're not seeing the edges of it, but this is like a stretched paper. There's a panel underneath it, and because of that, I can like, after I do a drawing and spray fix it, I could like put like a watery like sealant, a PVA, polyvinyl acetate glue over the top of it. You put a few coats of that on, and you could probably display your drawing without glass and without fear of like damaging it too much. The one caution that I would give you in relationship to that would be the PVA will darken your drawing. So it will like darken the darkest areas of graphite will get a little bit darker. So the impression that you have of it like at the start is not exactly the impression you're going to get after you apply PVA. So there is that aspect to consider. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I don't think it makes like tremendous difference, but there is a difference that is noticeable enough that I can mention it. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see. Sorry, there's a bunch of comments, and I'm trying to get to the next question. Pamela B is asking, I guess at the academy they started with the hard complex to separate the wheat from the chaff. No, not exactly. I mean, an academy, certainly like one as large as the one I went to, they run like a business, and so they're happy to have wheat chaff and everything else. I think that really anything that you do there is going to be quite hard, though. Like doing a bar drawing is hard, doing a cast drawing is hard, working with a figure is hard. Yeah, there's no no easy aspects to kind of get into once you start drawing representation. I think it's like all pretty challenging. So I just need to grab like a harder lead pencil. I think some of the leads that I'm using are like a little bit too soft for me. So I just got to track one down. If you give me 1 second, I should be able to find it. Okay, that's better. Yeah, I was just feeling like I was getting a little bit too, some of the values I was getting were a little bit darker than I kind of wanted them to be, and I wanted to kind of tone that down a little bit. so let's get to the next question here. Toby and Serge are applauding the idea of like a practical or applied anatomy, as I was talking about. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really cool course as well. I think one of the first episodes of that course that I want to do, and what it will be is kind of it'll be like a live stream workshop, just like I'm doing here, where you see like the videos in 4K, and you kind of have like multi-camera shots and everything. So this will probably be what the workshop will consist of. One of the first subjects I want to tackle though is actually connecting the head to the body. You know, it's such a critical thing to understand for portrait artists, which obviously is what I'm primarily teaching as people that want to get into portraiture or want to like sharpen their portraiture skills. And I find there's usually like this deficit in terms of, like once we get below the chin, we're trying to kind of get down to the rest of the body, like the drawings get like really generic. Because at that point, I think you need to start knowing a bit of anatomy to kind of connect the dots down there. Like if you don't know the anatomy of the shoulder girdle, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about like the sternum, clavicles out to the scapula, scapulas across to the spine, etc. We're talking about the shoulder girdle and the kind of muscles that connect the head of the body. Once you start to get them, like you can use them immediately, and I think your drawings improve. So that'll be the first topic that I work on. I'm pretty, like I said, I'm pretty excited about that as a concept, because I've been looking for a way to, like, obviously I have a passion for anatomy. I love studying anatomy. It's one of my, one of the most enjoyable things I think about teaching and studying overall. But like I said, in my post-academy career, it was just too heavy a topic to be comprehensive about. Like there's artists out there that have done like comprehensive takes about anatomy. They're great, but they've worked for like years and years and years and years on them. Like Stan Prokopenko has been working on his anatomy course for like 5 years. He initially set out, he said, we were talking about it, he said that, I think he said like he had planned on like 2 years, like he was going to do his anatomy course, and the schedule he had set was like 2 years, and it's like been 5 years. But like that's how it is. Like that stuff is it's so deep, and you can't like, I don't know, like you have to tell everything about it. Like you can't, kind of not leave bits out. But if you're planning to do a comprehensive course, well then of course it has to be comprehensive, which is why I think I want to talk about the stuff that I use daily, the stuff that I use every time. Because this stuff, frankly, like there's spinal erector muscles and things, and there's like a lot of deep muscles in the neck that like I'll tell you, like I haven't drawn them except for when I do anatomy studies, which is fun to do, but it's not, in general, if you're a portrait artist, it's not about doing an anatomy study, it's about making a portrait. So that's where I think I want to be with it. Right, so that was a long answer. Let's see, Serge Pierre is asking, do you have any plans on publishing a book on your technique and approach for portraits? I think that it might require a collaborator, honestly, to do that, because I respect, like, having gotten into creating videos and video tutorials, like, I understand the production of something, you really like can't take it lightly. It's a whole industry, writing books, publishing books. And so I think if I was working with somebody who was like interested in the project, I think I could, I think it'd be like really interesting to do, but I'm probably not going to set up to do it on my own. That being said, I also have just put a new page on my website that is called We Are Hiring. That's the kind of the navigation title for the page. And it's just looking for people that are like, so I got into this thing, I was hiring a video editor, and I there's a really like I found somebody. She was great. I mean, did her job and everything. You know, very professional. But what I realized is that I'm like previously I was an artist making the videos, so like I would always be embellishing them with things that were like relevant to artists, and I knew what to like cut and what to save because I knew, you know, about drawing and painting. And so I realized like I think if I'm gonna find somebody who really is gonna contribute a lot as an editor, they need to like know about drawing and painting. And so I was talking with a friend of mine in Sweden, and he mentioned, he said, well, you have a website, right? Like, why don't you put like a hiring page on the website? Because people that are going to your website, they're already interested in drawing and painting, and inevitably there's going to be like some Venn diagram where some of those people will also like know about video editing or this or that. And so I did that, and a couple of people reached out, and so I'm bringing it up here because if any of you obviously are inclined in those ways or in those industries, please feel free to reach out, and we can talk about a project, like if it's a book or whatever else, because of course my hands are pretty full just trying to take care of all the stuff I got to take care of, you know. Just gonna make a quick measurement here. Yeah, so zygomatic bone to zygomatic bone is roughly like half of the width there. So just gotta make sure I get that right. And by the way, when you're like measuring your proportions, you know, for me, like that's stuff that I'd look at. It's like what are like the big proportions. I try to use like kind of big landmarks, like, you know, is this more or less than like half the distance? You know, that kind of thing will usually give you a kind of good idea of what kind of sizes you should be dealing with are. I mean, you know, there's another thing too, just that you mentioned. I feel like it's a little bit of a, usually, well, when students are starting out, there's a couple like misconceptions that come across, like, and I went through them as well. I know them so well because I went through them. But when you first start out and you learn that you can like measure stuff, it seems like, oh, like measuring, that's great. You know, I'll use the measurements and I'll kind of get quite accurate. In the long run, I think measuring is really useful in the right ratio, in the sense that, you know, I'm probably drawing about 80% of the time, measuring maybe 20%. No, not even honestly. The ratio decreases over time as well. Like, I probably measure maybe 10% of the time and draw 90% of the time. As a student, I think, you know, you got to find what works for you, but, you know that measuring is something that is a supplement. You know, it's there to help you. It's not there to like make it. You're not going to make a great drawing because you measured a lot. You're going to make a great drawing because you're drawing well, and you're understanding the context and construction, and because of that, your measurements were applied to something very meaningful, very useful. Anyway, I digress. On to the questions. Gention Quelli, wow, I can't be pronouncing that right. I don't know if it's a soft or hard G, but Gention Kelly or Quelli says, hey Stephen, I have a problem recently when I draw and paint every day and every day and night nonstop, but then I feel tired and don't feel like drawing and then do something else, but it feels like I'm cheating. Yeah, I don't know, man. You gotta go like at your speed. Like there's one thing that's, you know, there's so many things that are like true in life that are true in drawing, but you have to kind of run your own race, you know. Having these like comparison points that are unrealistic, I don't think it really helps anybody. So, and also there's that thing where like everybody thinks everybody else is like the most productive person on the face of the planet Earth. Like I imagine all other painters, like, you know, finish their paintings in one pass and, you know, make 10 drawings a day, and, you know, they're like the most productive people ever. The reality is we're all like just doing as much as we can when we can. you know, sure, you can push yourself, and that's good. Like, you know, that's a good motivation. Like, I've always taken motivation that way, that like I always want to push myself and I want to do a little bit more. Um, but at the same time, like, you know, you got to understand that the goal is great. It's not about achieving that. It's just about being as productive as you're able to be. Um, just kind of be realistic about it. So I don't really think there's any. I don't think there's any cheating going on. I just think that, like I said, you got to draw and paint when you can, and when you can't, you just, you know, hopefully you don't do things that interrupt it. You know. Like when I was studying, you know, every like Friday nights were like big, because it was like the first night of the week you could actually like have some energy to like go out and do something. Of course, like if you party out on Friday night, you're not going to be at the studio Saturday morning. So, um, I don't know, if you're thinking about optimizing, you know, I would just think about, you know, what are you doing in your life around drawing and painting that that may or may not be kind of contributing to your progress. Kumari comes back with another question, asks, as I follow through your portrait study, it takes me about 5 hours to have a strong proportion, even for a pair project. I'm not able to move from proportion stage to a middle stage in value and line meet. Yeah, I mean, you know, early on, a drawing's going to take a little bit longer, I think, early on than it is going to later on. But that's kind of natural, you know, that's just like how it goes, and you just kind of deal with it. And as time goes on, I think you get more deliberate. I think the idea is that you get faster, but I think you kind of, you take less time to kind of get to the same place, because you're not like going in circles, you know. I think generally it's one of the things that's happening when you kind of get better at drawing and painting. You know, I'd say for students, like, you know, between 2 points, you know, you can go like this or you can go like this. And more often students are doing like this one, where they're kind of going on this really wiggly path in between 2 points. Let's see. Sorry, a bunch of questions came in. Maybe I've missed some. Right. Sudhanshu Bansore says, "Hey, are you not going to conduct any other competitions?" Yeah, there will be some competitions. It's gonna happen, but I think, you know, I previously I used to run competitions for my Patreon followers, and I want to do another one of those, another portrait competition. And I really want to kind of up the ante in terms of what the prize is. I feel like, you know, there's so many people out there, and I remember this when I was a student, you know, so many times like a competition would like ask you to kind of go outside of what you were doing. Like, you know, there's like the Elizabeth Greensfield's Foundation was a big one that everybody would apply to when I was a student. And what I think is great, that they would give like this really big prize, it was like a $10,000 prize or something. You know, they wanted students to like submit artwork, like they wanted, you know, paintings, and, you know, like, or at least I always remember like the people that won that award, they were always, they're like, it's not like they were doing like studies, like they had a great figure study and they sent that. I mean, that could be obviously like a part of the application, but they tended to select people that were making like really advanced artwork. Well, I think that's really cool, you know, for me. Obviously, like, I want people that are working with me to be doing great studies, you know, to be progressing in terms of portraiture and so on. So I feel like my competitions, you know, that's where I want to kind of focus on that, and I want to give people that are doing studies kind of a leg up, and also like, in a sense, a kind of a scholarship type opportunity where, you know, I mean, we all know the cost of art supplies and the cost of education. So I really want to kind of help people offset that. So they're coming. They're just, I got a lot of stuff cooking. Let's see. Kumari asks again, what do you suggest to get the proportion properly and efficiently? when you are projecting a vertical and horizontal axis to compare placement of others, where you mostly place it. Um, so the question is, what do I recommend for getting proportions quickly? Um, do I have a recommendation for getting them quickly? Can you get them quickly? Uh, I think that more often than not, when you are getting proportions right quickly, probably means that you have quite a familiarity with the subject. And so, if as a student where you don't have a lot of familiarity with, so you haven't like drawn 100 heads yet, I think a great way to sort that out would actually be to do some kind of thumbnail sketches beforehand. Just kind of get used to what your subject is like, what the shapes of it are, or what the three-dimensional forms of it are. And in that way, you can kind of accelerate your progress in terms of getting getting a good set of proportions on the page. Unfortunately, there's not really a way to like get proportions fast except for like know what you're doing. And I know that that's like, I'm not going to give that. That's not the advice I'm giving here. Because of course, if we all knew what we were doing, we would just do it, right? But just to say that there's ways that you can supplement your knowing how to do it, and that is through making smaller sketches and studies beforehand, because that's gonna in a way like advance your understanding past what it is at first, and allow you to maybe get something on the paper that makes a little bit more sense initially. Yeah. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Ephra Ram is asking a question. Is it always best for anatomicals to start with a 4H led to dimension? I'm not totally certain that I get the question there. Is it good to start with a 4H? I start usually with a harder pencil lead, just as I want lighter lines. This is something just to remember as well. And then, by the way, there's like a lot of this kind of advice as well in my FAQs on Patreon. Like I get a lot of questions about stuff like this, and so I've kind of made a whole post just to kind of answer those questions. Which is free, like you don't have to. I know some of you are just not subscribed there, so this information is available to you as well. But basically, you want to think about your pencil leads, just in terms of value, right? Like if you want a light value, use a harder lead. If you want a dark value, use a softer lead. That's really the kind of beginning and ending of it in a way. So yeah, it's good to start with the 4H. Let's see. SD1 asks, how is your process of engaging art being transformed by your engagement with your students and their art? I think it's always, one of the great gifts of being a teacher is that you get to work with like really enthusiastic people. I think that's the takeaway for me was always like working with these like really young, talented people, driven people, and for that matter, not even younger ones, but just people that are like kind of on fire to figure this thing out. The great thing about that is that it kind of that enthusiasm, that eagerness to learn kind of rubs off and kind of keeps you quite fresh, just in terms of your thinking and your own kind of desire to kind of grow and understand things. So for me, I've always really appreciated that from working with students at the academy, and then also but also like kind of students online as well. Which I've been doing for the last couple of years. For about 12 years, I taught at the academy, and then so it was all in person. But in the last couple of years, I've moved into just teaching online. Which means I can live wherever I want in the world, which is great. My wife and I always wanted to live in Norway, and I don't have to like travel all over the world to like work with people. Which again, for an artist, is like huge. It means I get that extra like week in my studio instead of like recovering from, flying to Los Angeles or something. Anyway, I digress. Um, yeah, so yes, of course, it always affects me. Everything, everything you do is gonna like affect your experience and your progress. So students have always definitely had an effect. By the way, not all students are like great to be around as well. I mean, like it's a mixed bag sometimes. You have students that are, there's a personality clash or something, and then that makes it really a struggle to work with. But in general, I think more often than not, you find people that you really kind of get along with because you're all kind of driven to do this thing to learn and understand better. Let's see. Sorry, I gotta scroll back up here. MJ says they just noticed the way that I hold the pencil and the movements look very elegant and efficient. I never, it's funny you mentioned that. It's like there's always like this thing that I do, right? Like where I'm kind of like trying to find my line. I never knew that I did that until I started like filming and making videos. It was that was just kind of unconscious stuff that you never notice until. By the way, if you're out there like holding your pencil at the back, you're probably doing that too. You might just not know it. Just kind of a cool aspect of maybe cool. I don't know. Maybe I become self-conscious about it. But in any event, I have noticed that there are these like kind of rhythmic movements that you get from kind of just trying to get the right line. Let's see. Ariana is asking, is it ever hard for you to part with your works? Do you have any pieces that have some special personal value to you that you would never trade for anything? There are pieces that I like to spend time around. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a professional artist, eventually you become disabused of this quite quickly because, of course, you need to make a living, so you got to get rid of your work. But actually, lately, I spend a lot more time like working with like my website and in video production, and I honestly haven't had a lot of time to actually commit to like, because if you're selling your work, you have to be emailing with galleries and collectors. It takes a ton of time and focus and attention. I genuinely just haven't had the time for it lately, and because of that, like I have all this work like just in my studio, and through that time, some of it, yeah, like I've actually become quite attached to. So much so that eventually, like, I'm not really highly motivated to actually do something about getting rid of all of it. I think one of my Patreon subscribers was actually asking about this, like, kind of, I feel like maybe she was like nudging me to kind of get some work out there because maybe she was interested in a drawing or something. She was like, "Oh, so what do you ever? I mean, maybe your Patreon subscribers would really like to maybe collect some of your work." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe." But I haven't lifted a finger to do anything about it as of yet. Leo Entrakin asks, "How much of your mastery do you attribute to learning to see versus the physical process of applying graphite to paper?" Yeah, that's a kind of cool question because it's like technique versus concept. And realistically, like I'd have to say it's probably like a 50-50 in a way. I mean, all the good technique in the world does not make for a great drawing, and all the great conceptual knowledge in the world does not make for a good drawing either. So you have to have a foot in both of those camps, I think, if you're going to do this stuff the right way. I think oftentimes, I found myself at various points in my education thinking to myself, oh, it's all about the concept, you know. Like if you like understand what you're supposed to be drawing, like in a way, like the drawing is made already. You just have to kind of get the values into the right place. But over the years, I think I've kind of, I wouldn't say I've softened about that, but I've come to understand that, you know, technique plays a major role in visual communication. If you don't have it, you know, if you have a very poor technique, you know, it can subvert a little bit your ability to express the concept you're trying to express. So for me, I put 1 foot on each side of that fence. I think so. I'm a big believer in having a good technique, like good actual application. And you know, sometimes for students, like this is a thing that really stands directly in the way for them is like they just don't know how graphite works. Like they don't know how to make a good gradation. Now, I'm not sure if the answer to that is like go draw like 100 spheres, you know, like just make 100 sphere drawings and learn to turn the form and make even values there, because there's like another side of it, which is you have to be kind of like quite interested in what you're doing to spend enough time to get good at this stuff. So for me, I couldn't draw 100 spheres. I would be bored to death. So, you know, I can only use that so much, you know, in terms of, you know, making sure that I get enough hours in, just like the raw time that you have to spend to like get good enough. So for me, I had to learn it, I think, partly like while making portraits, while making figure studies. I was never going to be able to do that stuff just on its own, you know. That was never, it was never going to be me. You know, I'm somebody that, you know, I used to think about it like it's like going to the gym. Like I never, when I was younger, like never exercised for exercise. Like I skateboarded for like many years because I loved skateboarding. It was like so fun, and because of that, you know, I was quite fit for, you know, during my younger days. I'm a little bit less fit these days. But anyway, the point is, um, you know, I wouldn't exercise because it was fun. I exercise because, or sorry, I wouldn't exercise because it was healthy. I'd exercise because it's fun. And I think, you know, drawing has like a similar spirit for me. I won't always learn something just because I know it's good for me. Um, I have to find a way to be engaged by it, you know, to make it somehow fun. You know, anatomy for me was like always, I always had to learn that through drawing a figure, you know. Like I remember in my first year at the academy, I remember falling asleep so many times in anatomy lectures. And Andy Emerald, I know you're out there. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. But, you know, I just, it's any lecture really. It's not like just an anatomy lecture, but just hearing somebody just talk and talk and talk for like an hour and a half. It almost doesn't matter what the subject is. You know, I'm just not grabbed by that. You know, I'm going to be doing stuff with my hands to kind of engage. Yeah, so I lost a little bit of the question. Oh yeah, it was about technique or concept, I think. But yeah, so the technique is important, but you gotta, I think, learn while you're doing something. It's the most useful way to kind of get around that. Let's see. Uh, Sudhanshu is saying, please make a vlog and show your room or my studio. Yeah, no, I should do that. I actually have, you know, one thing on the list. Somebody was asking about basically like how I kind of set up, you know, to like how I set up to draw, and obviously, you know, I need to kind of show my studio to kind of show that. So, um, rest assured that is on the way. That is something that I understand has to happen. So I will get to it sooner or later for sure. Let's see. Yeah, MJ is asking, how do you think about drawing curves? Yeah, no, so that's interesting. Actually, by the way, like I need to, I need to like get my drawing underway. Like I've been just like sketching away for like an hour now already. And if I don't get on the way, I'm not going to get anything done. Yeah, how do I think about? Wait, what is it? Oh yeah, straight lines. So straight lines and angle breaks. For those of you who follow what I'm doing, then you already kind of know that drawing with straight lines is a really big part of kind of having control while you're drawing, which is like a really big deal. It's it's funny maybe if you come at this from a much more like kind of artsy place where you're very concerned about making art and expressing yourself and things, and you hear somebody like me talking about like restraint and like control and like all these topics that seem like non-artistic, but like in representational work, being like out of control is counterproductive, and the stuff that's really, it takes a lot of time and effort to do, so you want to be as productive as possible. The point that I want to make inside of all this is with straight lines, I apply the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law. I think it's totally okay to have some gesture in your line. You can have like some arc in your line, but in general, yeah, you want to go from angle break to angle break rather than just going for a full-on curve. But understanding like the utility of that, just comes with time and practice. So I would say that trust your angle breaks, and eventually, you'll come to a place where you're able to probably get enough kind of movement in them for them to kind of feel quite organic. Let's see here. Sudhanshu asked a couple of questions. One is, do you have children? And two, where you get your references? I guess those two questions could go together. No, but I don't have any children, though very soon I will have a dog, actually. My wife and I are very much looking forward to that. So no kids. I don't think that's really in the cards for me, for us for that matter. But where do I get my references? They're all people I know, students or professional models that I've worked with, and just people I've kind of known over the years. I have done quite a few paintings of and drawings of my wife, of course, like you always do if you're an artist. Yeah, I think that's it. It's just people I know, and then professional models. Well, it was professional models when I used to live in New Jersey, because you actually had kind of models around. Here where we live in Norway, we're kind of in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So, well, no, we're not in the middle of nowhere. We live in a small coastal village, but there's certainly not like enough artists here to support a community of professional models. So I think that it's going to be a hard time if I ever need to start working with professional models again. I think it's going to be quite difficult. Yeah, so let's see. Kumari is asking, how important is it to have a good knowledge of the skull in a portrait? What's very important. It becomes like a lot of things. The more that you know it, like the more important it becomes. Like I was thinking about, there was that quote by Degas where he says, like, painting is something that is. I think he said that it's very. I'm gonna paraphrase it, right? Whatever. It's very easy when you don't know how to do it, and very difficult when you do. And I've been kind of meditating a lot on like the meaning of that in a way. And I think what he's saying there really is that like you kind of don't know it's difficult, like if you don't know how to do it. So it just seems like it's a breeze. And I think, you know, understanding the skull in a portrait is kind of similar. Like if you don't know anything about the skull, probably feels like you're doing fine. Like probably feels like the portrait's going just like it should. But like if you do, then you know like there's all these things that you can kind of pick up on, and I think it, in a way, it helps you to have like a better structure sooner, which, you know, is always desirable when you're kind of drawing and painting. You want to get that good, clear kind of sense of structure straight away. And I'm just going to kind of dial in some values so that we have kind of something to work with now. I wouldn't say they're exactly shadow shapes, but I want to get these kind of major planes described. You know, this whole side plane here is like kind of facing away from the light. So I need to kind of get that generally kind of darker, you know. And that's why, you know, when you're working, you know, if there was a question of like, why do we need to understand like the planes of the head? The answer is like turning the form and getting a sense of structure is really difficult if you don't know the planes of the head, if you don't understand it really well, and a lot easier if you do. So what I'm doing now is like just kind of establishing these big forms and major kind of dark planes, and major kind of passages of that are catching the light. And if I can do that quite efficiently, you know, we can get a good strong sense of form established without a whole lot of fuss. But eventually, of course, you know, the fuss will be there. We'll have to get to that for sure. I'm always like cautious in these live streams though, because I feel like, oh man, I'm not really gonna have like a lot of time to draw, so like, I don't know how far I want to go with the values, because like if I just like really push into values, all it's gonna mean is that I don't get to like all the design stuff that I want to do. You know, I'll be stuck like refining the values the whole time. So anyway, I'm just like in between responsibility and what I kind of know I have time for. Let's see. The second part of the question was, I'm confused mostly in the cheekbones where to track the zygomatic bone in a soft muscle. Can you explain the planes of the zygomatic bone? Explain the planes of the zygomatic bone. Yeah, I mean, the planes of the zygomatic bone in and of itself can be kind of interesting. I would just say that probably it's more useful like where the zygomatic bone is in relationship to the head than just like what the planes of it are like in and of itself. Basically, like the highlight here is one of the main kind of points in terms of like where the major planes of the head turn as we get down to the face. So kind of knowing that well is very useful. But also like we kind of get into a situation where I would just say you would get so much more value out of, you know, drawing the zygomatic bone from 2 or 3 different angles than you would get from like listening to me talk for like 2 hours about the zygomatic bone. So and also like I probably can't really engage, that's too complicated to engage with while I'm drawing. I'd have to kind of do one or the other. Let's see here. Swarmendu Roy asks, is it possible to complete a drawing without any kind of blending? Well, I mean, yes. I mean, yeah. Actually, here's the thing, for years, so I went to the academy, and at first, we were working with charcoal on this really, really rough paper called Roma paper. And at first, I absolutely hated it, because it's like almost like corrugated cardboard, like this paper. Like, it was so rough, and you're asked to make these like really eventually very refined drawings on this really super rough paper. So as a student, like I just didn't get it. I was like, why are we making this so much more difficult for ourselves? Why don't we work on a smooth paper? There was an answer to that eventually, which was simply this paper like stood up to more value. Like, if you want to get like really rich blacks, you're gonna need to have a paper that will kind of hold up to that, which is what Roma paper does. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Blending. So if you wanted to, so when I was a student, we started out drawing on that paper, and because of that, I would try like all sorts of different tools like brushes and things to try and like smooth out the value. And eventually what I discovered is that, with my abilities at that time, all the smoothing out and blending I did, really it just kind of deteriorated the drawing. It kind of made the structure a bit weaker. And so I went into this like backlash phase where I was like, that's it, no more manipulations. I'm just putting values on the paper, and if I can't get it with like the application of charcoal on the paper and my eraser, then I'm just not gonna get it. I'm gonna draw completely, in the most rudimentary form possible. And I did that for some years, and eventually, you learn a lot from doing that as well. But over the years, I've come to understand that like it's actually not necessary to totally avoid it. You just have to do it like the right way, but that's another story. To answer your question, yes, it's possible, but it usually just takes like a little bit longer, and I think in a way you wind up doing things that are a lot like what you would do if you were blending anyway. So I'm not sure totally of like the utility of it. I mean, it's a kind of a cool lesson, interesting experiment, but not like totally, completely necessary. Let's see. I need to get a drink of water, guys. Hold on a second here. Okay. MJ is asking, what are the difficulties of working on toned paper compared to white paper? Well, toned paper, you just have to contend with the use of white chalk, like which requires a bit of a different technique. If you've ever like drawn in graphite and in charcoal, right? If you have experience with those two different mediums, you'll understand that each one kind of requires like a slightly different kind of finessing, right? Like a slightly different kind of technique. And because of that, you can understand also that if you're using white chalk, it's going to behave like a little bit differently also than what graphite and what charcoal do. So really that's, I think, the difficulty of working on a toned paper is that like you just need to be cued into what technique is necessary to use what. And also like white chalk, I find in general, like of the different brands that you can get, I don't find that many of them like handle really well personally. I've always found them like a little bit kind of clunky. Like in terms of like with graphite, like I can just add like a value that I want to add and get it smooth like the first time. Whereas with I find that with like white chalk, I have to do all this like manipulation to get it as even as I want to get it, which is kind of a bummer. But eventually, that's why I started using that line, the 0.9 millimeter white chalk, just because I found that I had like a little bit more control over that in the initial application. If anybody's interested in like what that white chalk is, again, I would just refer you to the FAQs post in my on my Patreon page. Again, it's totally free. You know, you don't have to pay anything, but you can go there and it has links to like the drawing supplies that I use and like a lot of this stuff that's just, you know, I could repeat it over and over and over again, but like it's just there that you can find it. It's probably the easiest way. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm getting some of my shadow shapes in now, just so I have, again, like I'm accelerating a little bit kind of the process of like getting this drawing on the road. It's actually really hard to like actually answer questions, like do a live stream and do a drawing. So I'm talking a lot. And so it actually gets a little bit distracting and kind of my head spins a little bit sometimes. Let's see. Pamela B is saying, it's not all about the product for me, it's the process that I enjoy. Well, that is going to do very well for you, Pamela, because especially in the early years, the product doesn't always show up. So, like if you are in it for the product, it's going to be a bumpy ride, especially early on. But let's see. Yeah, Lee is asking if I could show a close up of my lead holder. Yeah, I guess that's it. It's a Koh-i-Noor lead holder. I like it because it's very light. A lot of lead holders I find are pretty heavy. This one's pretty light. I kind of like that about it. Otherwise, there's not really anything too significant about it. Just holds a 2 millimeter lead and it's pretty light. In terms of sharpening it, I can't actually really hold it up to show you, but like I can show you what I use. It's just this piece of sandpaper taped to a piece of cardboard. You just kind of rub the graphite back and forth on it until you get a tip. Yeah, again, nothing too complicated there. Just yeah, I mean, you have to practice it too a little bit because initially you'll probably like break your lead and stuff, but eventually you'll figure out how to hold that and not break it. Just want to try and get some of my value planes established here. I feel like I'm always in a time crunch doing this during a live stream, you know, just because graphite does not want to go quickly. You know, it's one of the first things that you eventually like stop doing as you get really good with graphite, as you stop thinking it's going to be fast. You just kind of get into the idea that it's going to be a minute before it kind of looks the way it's supposed to look. Especially when you're just kind of going into it like I am here, you know, like with these skull studies, I just kind of pick a skull and go. And also like all the time I'm spent like focusing on questions as well. Technique is something that actually, like that's, you know, when people say, oh, I find drawing meditative and stuff, you know, I don't know that I ever find it like totally meditative, but if there was going to be a part of it that felt that way, it's like the value application and the technique aspects, you know, I could find those maybe a bit meditative. Otherwise, you know, drawing for me is very, I would say it's more mindful, I guess, than meditative. Like, I need to be like really present if I'm going to get this stuff right. If I kind of start zoning out, which maybe by the way, maybe I just don't know about meditation. But if I start like kind of zoning out and not really engaging my mind, I'll probably start missing things, you know. So yeah, not meditative for me necessarily. Oh yeah, so some questions here. CD Gupta is asking, I love seeing live drawings. Keep posting, will do. Richard Hull asks, how do you track your progress in developing skills? That's a tough one, you know. In a way, I kind of think about it, and I always tell students this too. It's a little bit like kind of watching your own hair grow. Like you probably won't notice it, and maybe that's why you're asking that question, because you're obviously someone who's working to improve your drawing. I think probably just about everybody in my audience is in some form or another there to do that. But yeah, I think, you know, for me, I just did it through instructors. I mean, you know, like where I went to school, you would kind of work until you were passed on a project, right? So let's say you were doing a cast drawing, and it was like a really advanced cast drawing. You could be drawing it for 5 or 6 weeks, and then as you kind of got it to where it was supposed to go, your instructor would then pass you on that project. So there was quite a realistic way to understand your progress, because your teachers were kind of tracking that progress in no uncertain terms. So I can't, you know, unfortunately, I don't really, I can't relate as much to like just how to do it yourself. I mean, I suppose keeping your old drawings would be one way. You know, kind of comparing them every so often, which, you know, if you're doing a lot of work and you're you know, focused and everything, probably that should give you some idea of, you know, whether you're making progress or not. But that can be a hard one, man. You know, like just understanding your own progress in anything, I think is probably pretty difficult. Yeah. Right. So, what is his name? Samrita Rana asks, how do I stick to the same style? When I see other artists' videos, I try their style. You know, that question, let's see. You know, sometimes, right, there's questions that, like, there's not really a great answer to them, you know, but rather than just going, oh, I don't really think it's a good answer to that, like, I want to try to be, like, fair to the question and, like, give you, like, I guess what I think, like, the best version of that answer that could be is, because in general, like, you know, everybody's like so different. There's not really one way to like answer that question. How does anyone do it, or how do you specifically do it? You're the only one that can know that. But like I've been through this too, you know. So I mean, there's some things that are probably relatively universal about the experience of, you know, being kind of drawn to one aesthetic or another. Eventually, the thing that got me over that was more just I think a recognition of like what my goal was, which is more complicated than it sounds. When you're making representational art and you're, you know, focused as I am, like on portraiture, for instance, there's a pretty clear answer as to whether or not like you got what you were supposed to get. You know, did you get a likeness? Is it there? Does it appear to be that person? Is a sense of light glowing? You know, I think it's best when you're young to, in a way, be referential, not deferential, mind you, but referential. So, know what the objective of your work is. Like if it's a portrait study, just try and make it look like the person. I think in doing that, naturally, your way of drawing comes out. I was answering this questionnaire the other day. It says, some interview thing. They send you a questionnaire and then you answer all the questions, and then they print it on their site. If you ask me, it's a little bit like I'm doing all the work, which whatever. But what I wanted to say was one of the questions was actually like about this, like about your personal style and stuff like that, and like my opinion about it really is that I mean everybody has a style, like they have a way of drawing things. I think when you're not yet very good at drawing, like it probably doesn't really seem like very much, but as you draw more and more and more, your feeling for what you like and what you don't like will become more acute. You'll understand it a little bit better. And over time, that understanding eventually becomes a kind of a conscious way that you can understand what you would like your drawings to look like. And as we start to get to that point, you can understand that knowing what you want your drawings to look like and having a style of drawing or working, that's really what we're talking about here, right? Those artists out there that have like this really like dialed in style that they're working in, they understand very well what they like to look at, and that's how they're guiding their work. Early on, I'm not so sure that it's like really possible to do that. I just don't think you like know enough yet to like make a really informed decision about what you want your kind of drawings to look like. Hope that makes sense. Hope that's helpful. See, Toby Michael is asking, who are your favorite British artists? It's a cool question. I think probably it starts with Solomon J. Solomon. Definitely doesn't end there, but like Solomon J. Solomon was a really big one for me, just because if you don't know his work, it's just, think of like what 19th century artists like added to the world of like painting and representational art. Like Solomon J. Solomon was like the best, offered the most, I think, aesthetically of like the best of that vision. Like I'm obviously really, really high on him. I think he's really amazing. So he's for sure like number one on the list in terms of British artists. And I think like eventually he was like naturalized English, right? Like he was from I think he was from the Netherlands. Ugh, to like to check up on that would be. I might be wrong about that, but I know that he lived in the UK, and so like I mean you guys have claimed him. He's a British artist, but though I think he originated elsewhere. But Solomon J. Solomon was really amazing. I think that some of the usuals, you kind of have to appreciate what Waterhouse did. So much kind of great work kind of coming out of that guy. So consistent, and as I said, like I think Tadema was really great as well. So maybe I'll just leave it with those three for now, because somehow the part of my brain that I have to access to like remember like names and stuff, which is just not it's not like on the same place as the one that's like drawing and answering questions. Somehow those two parts of my brain do not like function well together. So I only have the ones that are at the absolute top of my mind, which is those three. Right, so let's see. Siddhi Gupta is asking, I want to see the Michelangelo live drawing. Whoa! A Michelangelo live study. Woof. Am I ready for that? Oh my goodness, a Michelangelo drawing. I mean, those things are complex, man. Um, I'll tell you what, I will put that on my kind of list of topics while making absolutely no promise that that will be necessarily the one. I mean, Michelangelo is like amazing. It was really complex, amazing work, and I think I'd love to tackle that eventually. But like, what would I start? Would I start with like the Libyan Sibyl? Like, you just dive into the Libyan Sibyl? Like, that feels so intense, you know. But I mean, like, I think that there's some like master studies that like I'm waiting to do that I'm gonna do, right? Like, I was thinking about it the other day. I've been a long time like promising to do like the next Sargent master copy, and I think I finally figured out what it's gonna be. And hopefully I say it here, and hopefully like I follow through with it, because maybe I think about this and think about this, and eventually I discover maybe it's not this one. But I was thinking that doing like a full length study of Madam X, like that would be a really cool project to do, for me, and also for like people that kind of want to study Sargent and kind of want to understand what he's all about. Madam X is like one of those paintings where it's it was such a big part of who he was as an artist, was like expressed in that early work. And I've also had through living in New Jersey, spending a lot of time in New York, I've had a lot of opportunities to see it like up close and personal, which of course is a good criteria for any like proper study of something, is you want to know what it really looked like up close and personal, if you're gonna do like an in-depth study of it. So that's what I was kind of thinking about with Sargent, was Madam X. Michelangelo, obviously one day I want to do something with the Libyan Sibyl. I mean, what an iconic drawing. Of course you just have to do justice to it, which that's the tough part of that one, is actually making sure that you give enough to it, because it's such like a complex and kind of beautiful artwork. Sanguine as well, like, is a medium kind of unto itself. I did a series on sepia chalk drawing, which is one of those kind of like similar but different situations where sepia chalk, I think, pretty much behaves, in my experience, just about like sanguine does, but with usually a little bit broader value range. So that's one of the reasons I kind of liked it, actually, is it had a little bit more kick to it in terms of like the values that you could get. But in general, it was not so different from sanguine, which would be a good preparation for working on Michelangelo's work. Oddly enough, along those lines, I've been talking for a long time with there's a good friend of mine, Brandon Soloff, is the artist that runs, I don't know if you guys and girls out there know Chelsea Classical Studios. They're an oil medium manufacturer, and I've talked to him for a long time because he's in like that whole kind of art supply manufacturing world, about making a mechanical pencil like version of sanguine. So just like there's like a 0.9 millimeter white chalk, I kind of figure, well, why couldn't there be like a 0.9 millimeter sanguine? Now obviously it has to do with the strength of the material, but manufacturers of like graphite, make 0.3, even like 0.2 millimeter graphite refills. So it stands to reason that if you can make a 0.9 millimeter white chalk and you can make a 0.2 millimeter graphite refill, you should be able to make a like a 0.9 millimeter sanguine as well. So anyway, that's something I wanted to do, and I wanted to do that because actually of the Libyan Sibyl. It was after seeing that at they had a show at the Metropolitan Museum a while back of Michelangelo's work, and I saw the Libyan Sibyl in person, and it's so small and it's so delicate, and it's with sanguine, which is like the hardest thing to reconcile, because it just doesn't seem like it's a material that should be like that. I mean, his approach, it was so fine. Like all the hatching was like so fine and so even. Like obviously he did it with like more, I don't want to say primitive materials, but he did it, you know, he didn't use a mechanical pencil. But looking at it, like, you would never know in that sense that it looked so controlled. And just based on my feelings, like I said, with like white chalk and stuff, I thought, oh, well, maybe there's a solution there for that. And apparently you can. Like, we got into like some conversations with a manufacturer about this, and he assured us that, yeah, like totally you can really make a lead refill of just about anything, because it's kind of like mixing with clay and stuff, and yeah, so it's possible to do, but somehow I think, you know, it's kind of the pandemic in a way that, like, I don't want to say like it got in the way, but you know, it kind of happened when, you know, or like the pandemic kind of came around when we were like in conversations about it, and then like my wife and I, like, we moved to New York, or to Norway, and so yeah, it just didn't go through. Probably one day I'll do it. There's a lot, obviously a lot involved in getting that project through. Yeah. So let's see. Sorry, yeah, other questions. I have to scroll here. Oh, MJ was asking, why do you prefer the particular Pentel pencil model? Yeah, this one, the I think it's the A3DX model by Pentel. I like it because it's like really light. Actually, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like a wood pencil, in that sense that it doesn't, like a lot of mechanical pencils, for some reason they want to make it like really heavy. Maybe it's like, you know, because we can equate like being heavy with being like valuable or solid or something, but I never liked how the pencil like kind of hit your hand, you know, like just being too heavy. It always felt like my hand was being led around by the pencil, instead of the other way around. And so it's mostly the lightness of it. Also, like, it comes into play when you're dropping your pencil, which I do kind of all the time. So the combination of those two things meant it was for me, the pencil of preference. It's not like, by the way, sorry if there's any Pentel manufacturer watching, I know there isn't, but it's not like really a special pencil, but it just has this combination of like weight and shape that just kind of works for what I like, you know. There are other like heavier pencils that maybe are kind of interesting to use, but for me, I always like this one from Pentel. So I'm trying to get like some structure into my halftones. At the moment, they're like a little bit too kind of nebulous for my taste, and so like structure in the drawing is suffering a little bit. But maybe I need to, like in the future, maybe I need to do like a white chalk drawing, because the thing about white chalk is that it gets you like halfway there. Like all of your mid-tone values, like this stuff, is already like dark enough. Whereas now, like I have to like build from zero, so it's just like kind of takes a little bit longer. And so I always feel like in these live streams, I always feel I'm like an hour behind where I should be. But there's just nothing, there's no, speeding up your value application in graphite is just, it is not the answer. Yeah. But we're getting somewhere. There's some structure here. It's going okay, but you always feel like it could kind of go faster. Let's see. Questions. Demo Marg asks, do you ever work from 3D renders? If so, do you have any specific pointers for that? I haven't, but I think that like for online students, this is a really great resource. And it's also something I was actually literally just thinking about today. So I told you all about like the we're hiring section of my website. I want to also put into that that I'm looking for somebody who actually is proficient in like 3D rendering. I don't even want to say what programs is. I only know a couple like ZBrush and stuff. I'm not even sure that's exactly what you want to be using, but there's a couple of concepts that I'd like to kind of hire somebody to appropriately render. Like for instance, like my particular model of head structure. I would love to make that a resource for my students, but again, like I actually don't have the time to learn an entirely new kind of program, so I need somebody who's already proficient in that to work with. So if you're out there and that is your deal, please get in touch, and we'll figure out a way to work together. So cool question. Let's see. Ephra Ram is saying, is it always best to start and finish a drawing by means of hatchings and not blending? I mean, there's very few things where you're going to find yourself saying always or never. I think that there are useful things that you can get from hatching and not. Well, let's say this: hatching is always going to have a place in a drawing, like, or almost always. I mean, rare is the drawing the artist that never needs to like properly hatch something. So I think it always has its place to a greater or lesser extent, but there's no version of always never that I can really give about any of those techniques. I mean, immediately what came to mind actually was Adolf Menzel. When I was saying like hatching is always going to be a part of a drawing, I was thinking about Menzel's work, and I was thinking, well, there's some of his drawings where you feel like, it's so organic. And I was trying to think, is there any hatching in some of them? Like he might be the one who's not really hatching. Like that might be his deal, or even like certain Fechin drawings, Nikolai Fechin drawings. There might not be much hatching in those, in some of them either, So it's thin ice whenever you start saying always or never. You're just about bound to come across a situation. I always found that too. Like I used to say this to students about, like, you learn these like concepts about looking at nature, right? Like you talk about light and shadow, or you talk about gesture, or this or that. These things that you're trying to like kind of apply as universal, rules and things, right? Oh, one that really popular one that everybody says is like your lightest shadow is always darker than your darkest light, and like it sounds really good because it sounds like really definitive. Like anytime you can say always, you know, and never, whatever, it sounds like you like really, yeah, we really got a hold of something there. But like I would tell students is as soon as you start to say always, never, like you know that the next time you look at nature, right? You know, I always refer to it as nature. We were working from like live models and things. So anytime you look at nature, you know, as soon as you think you have one of those things that is just irrefutable, you know, nature is going to show you some situation, some lighting situation that contradicts that, like for sure, every time it's going to happen. But anyway, that's I digressed from the answer. I don't actually remember the question. Let's see. Oh yeah, M. Collins is saying, don't forget to like the video. Yes, hey everybody, listen, everybody that's watching, you can do one tiny thing, costs you nothing, really helps me a lot. If you like, subscribe, turn on notifications, if you just throw comments in the comment section of this video, all these things like really help the visibility of this video, which obviously helps my my channel. So if you can please, you know, remember to do those things, like, subscribe, put in a comment. Any interaction that you make with this video is obviously something that's really good for its visibility and gives me a good reason to kind of keep putting out content as this channel's growing as it has been. So thank you for mentioning that. MJ is asking, can you talk more about the Apelles line? Apelles line is essentially the it's actually kind of a sculpting term. But it's basically the point at which a plane shifts. So so if you have like a kind of form like this, right? Let's say you have these kind of two planes. Like this is the Apelles line here, and it's just important to kind of understand, especially when you're making like kind of a linear structure for like a drawing or a painting, all those shapes that you're finding, those halftone shapes that you're finding, they're really relating to kind of Apelles lines within the light shape. Yeah, it's kind of just a cool thing to kind of understand. That gives some language to like what you're doing. It's always useful. Let's see, what's next? Somebody's asking when will this be over? I hope that you're not asking that like in a way that's like, when is this gonna be over? Oh my goodness. Hopefully it's more like of a how much more time do we have? But let's see, when is it going to be over? I don't know. I usually do a couple hours. I don't know how long we've been at this. It's, what time is it? Yeah, so probably have about 20 minutes left, but I thought that I'd like to like try and go a little bit longer with this one. Just because I always feel like at the end, like I'm like, oh, I barely got the drawing where, you know, started, and then now I have to go. But it's just like, you know, getting 2 hours to live stream, you know, it's like all these other things, you know, you can't do, and other stuff that I gotta do. Anyway, so I usually do about 2 hours is the answer to that question. I think we have about probably about 20 minutes of those 2 hours that I normally take remaining. Let's see, Sudhanshu has asked, have you ever traveled out of the country? Yeah, like actually so originally I'm from Miami, Florida. Grew up there in the 80s and left there to go to college in the late 90s. And I haven't really I've been back a couple times since, but not much. and after that, like I moved to North Florida, and then back to Miami for a minute. But then after that, I moved to Italy, and in 2004, and except for recently, where my wife and I were living in New Jersey for I think 3 years, 4 years. We were living in Europe for a long time, so I'd say that probably most of the time since I was young, I've spent in Europe. In Sweden, I lived for a while, and in Italy, of course, and now in Norway. So I spent a long time actually, like kind of being a bit nomadic, and in a way, I'm quite happy to move on from that. It's fun, by the way, also to travel and get out there, and I certainly think it's a great thing to have done. But eventually, you come to a place where like you wanna just kind of be somewhere, right? I think that's the point that I'm at now. I just want to be in Norway and hang out with my wife and get a dog and live that suburban life. Never thought I'd say that. Let's see. Someone's asking my address and how can you meet me. I'm not gonna give that out. Let's see. Nick Martin is asking, for a beginner, do you feel it's better to do a lot of quick drawings you don't finish, or is there value in trying to complete some? I kind of started the opposite way. It was mostly like doing really, really long drawings, and so for me, I found that eventually doing shorter drawings, I find like a great utility in it. Some of that, of course, is colored by the fact that so much of my time was spent doing very large long drawings. I needed to spend some time doing faster ones. So I think obviously it's going to be like a mixture of the two. Is going to be the most useful thing that you can do. Which is maybe not always the case. Sometimes it's nice to just totally specialize like in one thing. But in terms of drawing education, I feel pretty confident to say that a mixture of the two is definitely very, very useful. Okay. Yeah, I'm just, not getting as far as I want to go with this. Maybe the next one needs to be like a charcoal drawing. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, charcoal, the values, they advance so quickly, like you can kind of, you can get the impression that you've done a lot with a charcoal drawing without necessarily actually having done a lot, because the values, they go so quickly. I guess you can. There's faster ways that I could draw with graphite. But for whatever reason, I'm just on this kick of doing like slower, more kind of broad-looking drawings lately. So Gavin Hubbard asks, a lot of your work has a really wide value range with the darker area. How do you deal with graphite shine, or you just live with it? Yeah, that's not a bad take on that, Gavin. It is just one of those things, like if you're gonna go dark, you're gonna get shine. Like that's just kind of how it is. The only thing that I could say that will help you to mitigate that shine is to make sure that you're using like a very sharp pencil and drawing a little bit more perpendicular to the paper's surface. So like when I'm like adding very dark value, I'm not doing a lot like this. I'll actually get into a much more kind of perpendicular direction to the surface of the paper. That way you're not like burnishing the graphite that you put on. So it's a little bit of a tip. I wouldn't go as far as to call it a trick or something that fixes the shine. But if there's gonna be something that allows you in the most consistent way to avoid it. That's what I've discovered it is, because otherwise, or by the way, or just to not go very dark. Like those are the options that you have. There's not really one that that I've experienced that goes kind of outside of that. So let's see. Somebody's asking when I'm going to make a video on charcoal drawing. In the past, actually, I already have made one, but it might have been before. So like my tutorials are kind of split into two eras, basically. There's the era before I started editing on Final Cut Pro, and there's the era after that. And basically that kind of coincided with when I started shooting on DSLRs. So the film quality and the editing quality like went up massively. And this was after maybe I had been on Patreon for like a year by that point. And so I started making videos that were of like a much better quality. And so I started rotating out like the older ones and in favor of the newer ones. And since then, I've started to kind of bring some of the older ones back after kind of like re-editing some of them. But it's possible the one I did on compressed charcoal drawing just hasn't been re-edited yet. So suffice to say, I believe that actually there is one out there, but I might need to like re-release it. So yeah, I guess the answer is that I've already made one, and definitely it will see the light of day again sometime. I'll just make it available whenever I have like that re-edit done. Let's see, Goku is asking if I've ever used ZBrush. I have not. I think it's really cool, but it's one of those things where I feel like either I'm gonna go all the way into it or I'm just not gonna go into it. I feel like, you know, like I know from learning new mediums and like learning things like Photoshop, you know, there's a lot of what's the word, like there's a steep learning curve when you want to get into like a new medium like that. So I just have spared myself the time by just not diving into it. I probably, honestly, I probably won't, just because it's not it doesn't coincide with a lot of things that I feel like I'm gonna have to do myself. So I probably will just not get into it. Yeah, even though I bet it's really cool. Let's see. Somebody's asking what happened to my hand because there's a band-aid. So it's really cold in Norway, and our house is mostly heated with a fireplace. And so I burned my thumb on the fireplace door some days back, and I was just trying to spare everybody having to see my burnt thumb. Super awesome story there. But yeah, that's why I have a bandage. Let's see. Pamela's saying something about lead pointers are good too. Don't know what a lead pointer is. Actually, if you don't mind embellishing on that comment, letting me know what a lead pointer is. If it has to do with materials, believe me, I'm super interested. As I am with anything. As you know, you all probably know, if you follow me on Insta and you follow me on Patreon, you know that like I'm always in for a new tool or a new technique. So yeah, if you let me know what a lead pointer is and how that's different from these other materials, I would love to hear about it. Let's see. Yeah, Pamela was mentioning, so there was a question earlier about like how do you self-assess and how do you like understand if you're making progress. and she mentioned I had a kind of a series of questions I talked about at the end of one of my videos where I was talking about like how I self-assess at the end of a drawing, and she was saying that that it relates really well to like understanding like your own kind of growth, like this person was asking about. Um, I forget exactly which video it was. There's been a lot of videos over the years. I think it might have been the sepia chalk drawing video, but Pamela, if you want to confirm that in the comments, I'm sure that the fellow who asked that question earlier would be very grateful for a confirmation of whichever one that was. Someone was asking, how do you get, or Samrita is asking, how did you get such rich tones in the drawing of Alex? Well, the key to rich tones is unity. So, like, you know, when you start a drawing, like you start applying values, you see like all these like gaps in the values. Eventually, getting like a really rich value is not so much about darkening things, it's more about unifying things. And this is a place where I find that students, I don't want to like get it wrong, but there's a misconception that like really rich value is just about how black you can get, like how dark can you get your values. And inevitably, it's not actually the darkness that makes a really like rich value convincing. Rather, it is actually the unity of that value, which is a topic that I go into a lot in my tutorials. Really, because inevitably, like building up values, of course, you talk a lot about like what matters, like what really counts. So think about unity as like, in a way, like removing the texture of the paper from the value you're adding. I mean, that's a simplified way to think about it, but like it's the easiest explanation is removing the gaps in the values that you're applying. The more you do that, the more rich your values will seem, whether or not they're dark. And also in relationship to another question earlier, like which is how do you deal with graphite shine? Well, the way I do it is by usually not keying my drawings, so it's very necessary to make them like really, really dark. That's like the first thing that I do. And I do that by focusing on the unity of value, not on the kind of overall darkness of value. It's a complex thing, but it's very useful. Juliana was asking, do you know U and Uglow's work? I do. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, U and Uglow is a really interesting one. I guess you would call him like a modernist painter, but I think U and Uglow reminds me, or when I think of U and Uglow, I think of another painter that I actually like a little bit better than U and Uglow, which is not to throw shade on Uglow, but just like the two are so close together in my mind, and I just happen to like one a little bit better. There's a painter, Irish painter called Dermot Kelly, and he makes just really fantastic, very simple works, much like Uglow did. You know, I mean, it's not, you're not ever like marveling at the infinite complexity of Uglow's work. If anything, you're marveling at the simplicity of it. But it's this like really, really orchestrated simplicity. It's really beautiful, really wonderful to look at. And Dermot Kelly, again, is very much like that. I think probably Dermot would have been looking at Uglow's work. I'm sure if you asked him, you know, he would tell you that, like, one is an influence of the other, you know, kind of thing. Let's see. Toby's asking, how would you approach making a large multi-figure composition? I would make many sketches for years, probably, before I committed anything to a canvas. Yeah, I mean, multi-figure compositions, you know, if this is your aim, I think that you really have to make friends with preparation. not only just from a practical perspective that like it's a lot of work to make a painting like that. You also want to ensure that you're making the right painting, not like I guess what I mean is a lot of times as artists we can like start a project maybe prematurely and not have thought it out, and we get a really long way into it and realize, oh, this isn't really the project that I wanted to paint, like, or there was some different aspect of this that I wanted to show and I didn't plan for it, and so you can kind of wind up abandoning the project because you didn't really realize what it was or what it was supposed to be. Many is the painting that I've eventually had to abandon because I just didn't understand where I was trying to go with it, and once I did understand that, it wasn't what I thought it was or what I wanted it to be. Which sounds like really tragic, but it's just the nature of the beast, right? So I would approach it by planning like crazy, and it's not to say like just not allowing for any like mystery in the execution, but it's just so that like when you're ready to execute, then that's what you're doing. You're not planning, you're executing. And that's one sure way to make sure that you have the attention necessary to like put all that joy and that kind of mystery into the paint application, is that you're not also preoccupied with stuff that you maybe should have been doing before. Let's see. A name in Cyrillic that I cannot pronounce, saying the live sketch streams are so great. Cool that you're focused on skulls lately. Yeah, the skull streams, what this is, I mean, I say this probably every time, so like if you're a frequent stream watcher, then you can just tune out and keep sketching. But what I wanted to do with these streams was just give people a kind of like a little extra motivation, right? Like I used to do when I lived in Sweden, I did these, we called it open drawing, but every, I think, Sunday at the academy, I'd go to the studio and make some tea and like set out some biscuits and things. And it was like an open call for anybody in the city who wanted to like come and draw. Like we just had a model and we would just draw. It was like a really chill time, and it was just a reason for people to kind of casually get together and draw. And for online students, I think that's like one of the hardest things to find, is like something that's not behind a paywall, but is also like a motivator for you to like make sure that you kind of come out and draw and like make the progress that you want to make, right? Because you need to spend a lot of time drawing, I think, to get any good at it. And whenever you have like a nice casual motivation like that, I think it's super, super useful. So this is my way of just trying to like solve that problem for people, which is to say like, give them a good reason to get those 100 skulls under their belt, right? Like, you gotta draw, I'm sure everybody's heard, like you gotta draw like 100 heads or whatever. If you're gonna get to some level of like expertise or understanding about portraiture, you gotta get your mileage in. So this is me volunteering some time to help people get a little bit of that mileage, because I think that's all it takes sometimes, is just a little bit of extra motivation, a little bit of a reason to like tell your family or whatever, like, I've got to tune out, I have a live stream coming and I'm gonna go draw, and like this is like my time and I'm taking it. Because everything else in the world is out there like asking you not to do it, asking you to do something else. And so I'm here asking you to come and draw a skull for a couple hours and just get like a little bit better at drawing, a little bit better than you were when you started. So that's the whole idea. Rohan Rana is asking, man, your channel is growing fast. The last time I checked, your sub count was about 5K. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, YouTube, I think, is a great has a great like system of like organic growth. It's really good for creators. Also, you know, for me, YouTube. I don't want to say never, but YouTube isn't really like an income source for me. It's just like an outreach thing. So like, thankfully, I don't think I'll ever be like putting in ads and stuff like that. I don't have anything against people that do, but like, I know when I'm watching YouTube, like I get super annoyed by like Google's pop-ups and stuff. I understand people got to make a living, but just suffice to say, that's not really a part of the plan on this channel. And this is just a cool way to like let people know what I'm up to and kind of engage with my audience. Also, in a way, that's a little bit different from Instagram. Like a lot of you probably know me from Instagram, right? Like that's where I do most of my like social media outreach stuff is on Instagram. But the thing about Instagram is like Instagram is made for stuff that like looks cool for a minute, and like that's fun, and there's like a lot of stuff that does that. But like things like this, like I wouldn't really do this on IG because like people aren't really on Instagram to do that, and I think YouTube, like people are on YouTube to be there for a while, and so that's why I've kind of like chosen to focus in on it, because there's a lot of stuff obviously about drawing and painting that like takes a long time, and if you don't have a long time with your audience, they're never really going to kind of get to see, for instance, how cool it is to do like skull studies like this. You can't get this by scrolling by in like a minute. You need to be here to like watch the whole thing grow. So anyway, that's why I think YouTube is so cool, and why like I'm coming to it and trying to kind of like think up useful ways to kind of add value to people's experience. Huge digression. Sorry for that. Let's see. There's a lot of questions left. I think that actually I probably need to call it a day. These skull drawings, they never get as far as I think they should get. But maybe I just need to adjust my expectations. We did get a decent sense of like structure. It's three-dimensional enough to be for it to be said that some drawing took place. Maybe you know what? Maybe I just need to do the next one just with line, just like not get into value, and just see how far I can push like a line drawing. I don't want to make any promises because maybe I get really interested in doing a value drawing next, but I'm planting the seed here. Maybe the next live stream is all in line, and maybe that's going to be like a really cool kind of topic to kind of get into. In fact, maybe I need to do like a whole tutorial on line drawing. I've always thought, frankly, that it's underserved. Value gets like all this glory. Like how everybody says about painting, right? They always say like, oh, color gets all the credit and value does all the work. I think in drawing there's like an analogous saying that you could say like, value gets all the credit and like line does all the work. But I'm sure some artists out there would debate me about that. Anyway, this is going to be the stream for today. I think that the next one, I'll announce it as long as I can in advance. By the way, like if you're on my Patreon, I do announce when these streams are happening on the monthly like updates. I did a January update on news and updates, and I announced this stream there. So if you're following me there and you want to be here, this has been available for like a couple weeks, the link and everything. For those of you that have just tuned into the stream, you never heard of me before, if you do want to like get in-depth tutorials and in-depth lessons about like how I do what I do, I'll put a link up here. There's a link in the description of this. You can follow me on Patreon. It costs only a tiny bit, and you get really a ton of content. But listen, thank you everybody so much for dialing in and asking all these questions. And next time, I think it's got to be another skull drawing. So I'll see you then.